This is the mystery of the Baghdad Battery. In the silent sands of Mesopotamia, where empires once rose and fell like waves against time, a small clay jar was unearthed, an object so simple in appearance, yet so dangerous to our understanding of history. This artifact would challenge everything we think we know about ancient technology. It would raise a forbidden question historians still struggle to answer. Did ancient civilizations discover electricity thousands of years before the modern age? This is the mystery of the Baghdad Battery. In 1936, during routine excavations at the ancient site of Qujat Rabu, just southeast of modern-day Baghdad, archaeologists stumbled upon a collection of unremarkable-looking clay vessels. There were no inscriptions to announce their importance. No gold, no jewels, no dramatic carvings. Yet one jar, sealed with asphalt-like bitumen, would quietly ignite one of the greatest debates in archaeological history. The artifact stood about 13 centimeters tall. Inside it was a rolled sheet of copper forming a cylinder. Suspended at the center was an iron rod, carefully isolated from the copper by the bitumen seal. The design was deliberate, precise, purposeful. It was not until Wilhelm Koenig, the director of the National Museum of Iraq, examined the object that its true strangeness emerged. Koenig noticed something that did not belong in the ancient world as historians understood it. The configuration was nearly identical to a galvanic cell. A battery. At the time, the idea was heretical. To understand why the Baghdad Battery unsettled scholars, we must understand its construction. The outer container was made of fired clay, a common material in Mesopotamia. Inside it sat a copper cylinder, hammered from a single sheet and soldered along the seam. The copper showed signs of chemical corrosion, suggesting prolonged exposure to an acidic substance. At the core was an iron rod, its tip badly oxidized, as though it had once been eaten away by an electrochemical reaction. The rod was not randomly placed. It was carefully centered and sealed at the top with bitumen, ensuring it never touched the copper. This separation is critical. When two different metals are separated and placed into an acidic solution, an electrical potential is created. Modern batteries use the same principle. Experiments would later prove that filling the jar with vinegar, wine, or fermented grape juice produced between 0.5 and 1 volt of electricity. Not much by modern standards, but enough. The accepted history of electricity begins in the 18th and 19th centuries, with figures like Alessandro Volta, Michael Faraday, and Benjamin Franklin. According to textbooks, before them there was only superstition, lightning, and fear. The Baghdad Battery threatens that narrative. If the artifact truly functioned as a battery, then ancient civilizations were not merely passive observers of nature. They were experimenters, engineers, innovators. Mesopotamia was already astonishingly advanced. These were the people who invented writing, legal codes, advanced astronomy, irrigation systems, and monumental architecture. Is it truly impossible that they also stumbled upon electrochemistry? Or have we underestimated them? One of the most compelling explanations for the Baghdad Battery is electroplating. Electroplating involves using electricity to coat an object with a thin layer of metal, often gold or silver. Ancient artifacts discovered throughout the region show evidence of incredibly thin, even metallic coatings that are difficult to explain through hammering alone. German Egyptologist Arne Egebrecht conducted an experiment in the 1970s. Using replicas of the Baghdad Battery, he successfully electroplated a small silver figurine with gold. No modern tools. No hidden tricks. Only ancient principles. If true, this suggests ancient craftsmen possessed not only the technology, but also a working understanding of controlled electrical processes. Another theory takes us away from workshops and into temples. In the ancient world, electricity would not have been understood as a scientific phenomenon. It would have been seen as divine. Imagine a priest holding a metal object, connected invisibly to a hidden jar. A worshipper reaches out and feels a sudden shock. To them, this would not be chemistry. It would be godly power. Some scholars believe the Baghdad Battery may have been used in ritual settings to create the illusion of divine presence or punishment. Electricity as a tool of belief, a controlled miracle. The gods of Mesopotamia were associated with storms, fire, and unseen forces. Electricity fits perfectly into that worldview. Not everyone is convinced. Many mainstream archaeologists argue that the Baghdad Battery was never intended to generate electricity. They claim the jar may have been used to store sacred scrolls, papyrus, or religious relics. They point to the absence of wires. No switches. No written records describing its use. But history is filled with lost knowledge, papyrus rots, libraries burn, civilizations collapse. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Throughout history, advanced knowledge has appeared, vanished, and reappeared. Roman concrete that outlasts modern cement. Greek mechanisms that predict eclipses. Ancient maps that show ice-free Antarctica. The Baghdad Battery may belong to this shadow history, a lineage of forgotten science buried beneath dogma and time. What if electricity was discovered, forgotten, and rediscovered? What if progress is not linear but cyclical? In laboratories around the world, replicas of the Baghdad Battery have been built again and again. Each time, the results are the same. It works. The voltage is low but scalable. Multiple jars connected together can increase power. A primitive battery bank. Enough to electroplate. Enough to shock. Enough to change history. If ancient people harnessed electricity, then our understanding of technological evolution must be rewritten. The ancient world was not primitive. It was suppressed by time, and perhaps by modern pride. The Baghdad Battery sits quietly in museums, stripped of its power, labeled and categorized. But its true charge remains. It asks a single question that refuses to fade. What else did the ancients know that we have forgotten? To understand what the Baghdad Battery truly was, we must return to the exact world in which it was created. The artifact dates to roughly between 250 BC and 250 AD, a period when Mesopotamia was ruled by the Parthian Empire and later the early Sasanian dynasty. This was not a dark age. It was a time of trade, science, and cultural exchange. Baghdad did not yet exist as a city, but the land around it was one of the most technologically active regions on Earth. Trade routes connected Mesopotamia to India, Egypt, Greece, and China. Knowledge moved with merchants. Chemistry was not called chemistry then. It was metallurgy, alchemy, and craft knowledge passed from master to apprentice. Copper, iron, acids, bitumen. Every component of the Baghdad Battery was well known and widely used. Nothing about the materials was accidental. If we reconstruct events as they likely happened, the process becomes clearer. A craftsman begins with a clay jar fired in a kiln. Inside, a thin copper sheet is rolled into a cylinder. The seam is soldered using techniques already common at the time. An iron rod is forged, smoothed, and placed carefully in the center. Bitumen seals the top, serving two purposes. It holds the rod in place and prevents contact between iron and copper. Then comes the missing element, the liquid. Fermented wine, vinegar, sour grape juice. All readily available. Once poured inside, a reaction begins immediately. Electrons move. An invisible force is born. The craftsman may not call it electricity, but he sees its effects. When the iron rod is connected to another metal object submerged in a gold salt solution, something extraordinary happens. Gold begins to move. It migrates, molecule by molecule, bonding evenly to the object. No hammer marks. No uneven layers. This explains why some ancient artifacts show metallic coatings far thinner and more uniform than traditional methods allow. This is not speculation. It is reproducible. A common objection is the absence of wires. But wires are not required. Metal strips, rods, chains, or direct contact would work just as effectively at low voltages. Organic materials decay. Copper corrodes. 2,000 years erase evidence. What remains is the core device, the heart of the system. When the artifact was first uncovered, it was catalogued without special attention. Only after Wilhelm Koenig examined it closely did alarms quietly ring. Koenig did not announce a discovery of ancient electricity to the world. He cautiously proposed it as a possibility in a 1940 paper. Even then, the idea was controversial. The Second World War soon diverted global attention. The artifact sat largely ignored while history repeated itself. Knowledge lost. Again. In the decades that followed, scientists revisited Koenig's hypothesis. They built replicas. They tested liquids. They measured voltage. Every serious test produced electrical current. No experiment has conclusively disproven its ability to function as a battery. Why then is it still dismissed? Because it disrupts the accepted timeline. Because it suggests ancient people were not intellectually inferior. Because rewriting history is uncomfortable. Many textbooks still label the object as ceremonial. But ceremonies do not require isolated metals and acidic reactions. Engineering does. The Baghdad Battery does not stand alone. It exists alongside other anomalous artifacts. The Antikythera mechanism, Roman nanotechnology in glass, precision drilling in ancient stone. Each discovery forces the same question. Were the ancients more advanced than we admit? When empires fall, knowledge dies. Libraries burn. Masters are killed. Apprentices scatter. The Baghdad Battery may be a survivor of a once common technology. One tool among many. What remains today is not proof of ancient electricity alone. It is proof of human curiosity, experimentation, observation, and innovation. The Baghdad Battery tells us not what the ancients believed, but what they did. They tested the world, and the world responded. When modern researchers attempt to understand the Baghdad Battery, they begin with controlled reconstruction. Every variable matters: metal purity, acidity, temperature, and contact method. Replicas are built using copper sheets of similar thickness, wrought iron rods comparable to ancient metallurgy, and unglazed clay jars fired at temperatures consistent with Parthian kilns. The electrolyte is the key. Tests show that vinegar, acetic acid, wine, tartaric acid, and fermented grape juice all produce measurable electrical output. Vinegar produces the most stable reaction. Voltage readings range between 0.4 and 1.1 volts. The current is low. But current is not irrelevant. Low current is ideal for electroplating. One battery alone does little, but several connected together do much more. By placing multiple jars side by side and connecting iron to copper sequentially, researchers demonstrate voltage accumulation. This is not speculation. It is basic electrical principle. Even 5 jars can produce a noticeable effect. There is no requirement for insulation as understood today. Dry air, bitumen, and ceramic separation are sufficient at low voltages. A metal object is submerged into a solution containing dissolved gold salt. The object is connected to the iron rod. The copper cylinder serves as the opposing electrode. As current flows, gold ions migrate. They attach evenly. The layer is thin, controlled, and repeatable. This matches ancient artifacts that show uniform coatings without hammer deformation. Accidental batteries do not occur naturally. The isolation of metals is intentional. The sealing with bitumen is intentional. The choice of copper and iron is intentional. No known storage jar requires internal metal separation. This was designed. Ancient technical knowledge was rarely written for the public. It was guarded, passed orally, restricted to guilds and temples. When cities fell, that knowledge vanished. Clay tablets recorded laws and trade, not workshop secrets. After Koenig's proposal, the artifact was quietly relabeled. No public declaration. No re-education of textbooks. It was placed among ritual objects. A safer category. Archaeology demands context. The Baghdad Battery was found alone. No workshop. No tools nearby. This fuels skepticism. But looting, erosion, and war have erased countless contexts. Absence does not negate function. The Antikythera mechanism was dismissed for decades. Too advanced. Impossible. Until analysis proved otherwise. History has made this mistake before. The object can generate electricity. It was intentionally constructed. It uses known ancient materials. It predates modern batteries by nearly 2 millennia. These are facts. Who built it? How widespread the technology was? What knowledge system supported it? Why it disappeared? These remain unanswered. Human innovation is older than we think. Progress is fragile. Knowledge can be lost. Rediscovery is not invention. The Baghdad Battery does not prove ancient power grids. It does not rewrite physics. But it does prove something equally important. Ancient people experimented. They observed. They refined. And sometimes they discovered truths long before history was ready to remember them. The historical environment in which the object was created is critical to understanding its purpose. Between roughly 250 BC and 250 AD, Mesopotamia was not an isolated or primitive region. It was a crossroads of empires, trade routes, and technical knowledge. Craftsmen in this region worked daily with copper, iron, acids, resins, and bitumen. Metallurgy was advanced, controlled, and highly specialized. The object now known as the Baghdad Battery would have been made deliberately, step by step. A clay jar would first be shaped and fired. A sheet of copper would be hammered thin, rolled into a cylinder, and sealed along its seam. An iron rod would be forged separately, cleaned, and placed precisely at the center. Bitumen would be applied to seal the opening, preventing the iron from touching the copper while also securing the rod in place. At this point, the device is inert. Its function only begins when a liquid is introduced. Vinegar, fermented wine, or sour grape juice were all common substances in the region and time. When poured into the jar, these acidic liquids immediately trigger a chemical reaction between the copper and iron. Electrons begin to move. A small but real electrical current is produced. The people using the device would not have described this as electricity. They would have known it only by its effects. They would have observed tingling sensations, sparks under certain conditions, or changes occurring to metals placed into prepared solutions. Knowledge in the ancient world was empirical. What worked was kept. What failed was discarded. One of the strongest practical explanations for the device is metal electroplating. Ancient artifacts from the region sometimes show extremely thin and even layers of gold or silver bonded to base metals. These layers are too uniform to be explained solely by hammering or fire gilding. When modern researchers recreate the jar and use it to electroplate small objects, the results closely match what is seen on ancient items. The process is simple but precise. A solution containing dissolved metal salts is prepared. The object to be coated is submerged and connected to the iron rod. The copper cylinder acts as the opposing electrode. As current flows, metal ions migrate and bond evenly to the surface. The coating is thin, controlled, and repeatable. This is not theory. It is reproducible in laboratory conditions using materials available in antiquity. Some have argued that the device was used for ritual or religious purposes. In the ancient worldview, unseen forces were attributed to divine power. A controlled electrical shock would have appeared supernatural. A priest administering such a shock could convincingly demonstrate the presence or judgment of a god. While this theory cannot be proven, it aligns with how unusual natural phenomena were interpreted in ancient religious systems. Skeptics often point to the lack of wires, switches, or written instructions. However, low-voltage systems do not require insulated wires as we understand them today. Metal strips, rods, chains, or direct contact are sufficient. Organic materials decay. Copper corrodes. 2,000 years erase fragile components. What survives is the ceramic and metal core. When the object was discovered in 1936 near Qujat Rabu, it was initially catalogued without special attention. It was only after Wilhelm Koenig examined it closely that its unusual configuration was noted. Koenig cautiously proposed that it may have functioned as an electrical device. He did not sensationalize the claim. He published it as a possibility. Soon after, global events intervened. The Second World War disrupted research, displaced collections, and halted serious study. The artifact remained largely ignored for years. When attention returned to it, the idea of ancient electricity had already become controversial. Post-war researchers reconstructed the object repeatedly. They measured voltage, tested different liquids, and varied materials. Each serious experiment produced electrical current. Typical voltage ranged from 0.4 to just over 1 volt. One device alone produced little power, but multiple jars connected in sequence increased the output. This scaling effect is fundamental electrical behavior. Academic resistance has remained strong, largely because the artifact challenges established timelines. Archaeology relies heavily on context, and the device was found without associated tools or workshop remains. However, centuries of looting, erosion, and conflict in the region make missing context unsurprising. History contains many examples of advanced knowledge appearing earlier than expected. Roman concrete, ancient astronomical devices, and precision stonework were all once dismissed as impossible. In each case, evidence forced reconsideration. What can be stated with certainty is limited but significant. The object was intentionally constructed. It is capable of producing electricity. It uses materials and techniques known to the period. It predates modern batteries by nearly 2,000 years. What remains unknown is equally important. We do not know who built it, how widespread such devices were, or why the knowledge disappeared. It may have been rare, restricted, or experimental. When empires fell and knowledge systems collapsed, such techniques may have vanished with them. The Baghdad Battery does not prove the existence of ancient power grids or advanced electrical infrastructure. It does not overturn physics or rewrite all of history. What it does demonstrate is that ancient people experimented, observed results, and refined practical techniques in ways modern narratives often underestimate. The artifact stands as evidence not of lost civilizations with impossible technology, but of human curiosity and ingenuity. It reminds us that discovery is not always linear. Knowledge can emerge, be forgotten, and later be rediscovered. The true mystery of the Baghdad Battery is not whether it worked. It did. The mystery is how much similar knowledge once existed, and how much of it was lost before it could be recorded, preserved, or understood by the generations that followed. This is where the evidence ends, and the unanswered questions begin.